Yeah, okay. I just want to be sure I've got it here. Now, can you bring it up for me? Yeah. Hold. Right.
It's just a cable underneath.
Is that safe enough there now?
Those two.
Those two,
Right.
okay. Thanks very much, Charlie. I've brought a PowerPoint and I'll talk around it and just use the bullet points to say what I have to say. I've just taken the title of the session from the brochure as it is, and should move now, Charlie. I'm pressing the right buttons here. This one here?
No, this one here.
This one?
Oh, it's not changing. Hold on a sec.
Okay, from business.
Is that the first one? Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
So that
That one,
there,
okay,
above.
yeah, okay. This here is a statement from the Taoiseach's risk assessment, national risk. What are the risks to Ireland in 2014? It's published every January. And this was after the crash and all the mayhem of the financial crash and the implosion of the banks. One of the priorities for our country and our people is to ensure that we learn from the mistakes of the past. Listen to all your speakers here today. Never again should dissenting voices be silenced when warning of risks up ahead. We must work to ensure that Ireland's terrible reversal of fortune never occurs. So what's happened since January 2014? Have we learned from our mistakes? Have dissenting voices been listened to? The answer is no. I'm going to go through this very quickly because you've even heard more detail from Elaine and from Catherine Connolly. Prosecuting white-collar crime, have we learned anything on that? No, we had the recent collapse of the Sean Fitzpatrick trial. Protecting children? When the Tussler report came out recently, somebody described it as an eye-opener, as if it was a surprise, as if they'd never seen anything like it before, when only last year or the year before you had the Grace case and the babies, chewing babies case. The guards, do I need to say anything? The health service, we had Susan Mitchell here last night giving a detailed blow-by-blow account of the Portlaoise Hospital. It's gone on and on and on, and to this day nobody has been held accountable. Banking. Think of what the banks did and the mayhem that they brought and the suffering they brought to people. They were at it again since 2014 with tracker mortgages, where people lost their homes because of the behaviour of the banks in that regard. The central bank, when asked, has the Gardaí been called in? They said yes. We haven't heard anything about that yet, and don't hold your breath, okay? Tiny fines, paltry fines for failings to control vast money laundering in the banks. The universities, University of Limerick, which has been referred to here, and politics. And Kenny was investigated on the question of whether he had fired the Garda Commissioner. He did fire the Garda Commissioner, but the tribunal kind of found a way to say he didn't. Now, why do inquiries, reports and tribunals not work? And I come around to agreeing with much of what many of the other, but the first thing is, and this is a statement by Tracy Cooper, who set a new standard for investigating our health service, HICWA, an English woman who was here for a number of years. When she left Ireland, her parting shot was, the problem is we have never had any, I put the word in, personal consequences. If there is repeated systems failure, nothing really happens. In Ireland, you have not cracked accountability. And I've just put in one finding. You can't keep track of this stuff, by the way, if you take an interest in it. Just there last week, June 2017, 2010 to 2014, 177 million paid out for claims against the state for systems failures rather than any individual failure. So here we have, it's a systems failure as the cover-up. Now, Joe likes to mix serious stuff with entertainment. So I've decided to inject a little bit of culture into the process here to lighten it and also maybe to bring a bit of light. This is Mulholland Entertainment Limit presenting a farce that ends up as a tragedy in 6 or more, it can be 60 acts, as you will see. The title of the play is Nothing Really Happens, and the authors are Muintir and Ahern. We're all involved. And when Joe does his literary tour of Glenties in the future, he won't only take you to Patrick MacGill's house and to the house where the sisters for the Dancing at Lunasa lived. He'll take you to Glenties Hotel as the place where the premiere for Nothing Really Happens what took place. So Act 1, dastardly deeds backstage. The lights are in darkness, you don't know what's going on back there. Corruption, cruelty, incompetence, and dissent punished back there. There are no lines, there are no memorable lines from this because it's silence. Nod and wink, turn a blind eye, and so on. And then, ta-da! RT investigates, Mick Wallace lets loose in the Dáil in a pink shirt, the curtains go up, the lights go on. What problem? There's no problem. What scandal? No scandal. And the plot there is denial, circle the wagons, and whistleblower reprisal, which I'll come back to. The memorable lines, there's a prize for people if they can remember all these things. The Mona should go and commit suicide. Who? Okay, I'll give you another one. The man is not well in himself. P. Flynn, Kilmartin, okay? You see what I'm getting onto here? The HSE funds were withdrawn from the little NGO where the whistleblower was blowing the whistle on Grace. Persistently drew down funds to try to cripple the NGO that this great woman worked for, and so on. So that's Act 1. Act 2 is called Cover-Up, and this is an internal inquiry. So a Garda is assigned to investigate penalty points, an assistant commissioner to assess penalty points. In Tusla, Catherine Zappone has asked the CEO for an analysis. Okay? Or an external inquiry by Resilience, or by, I forget the names of all the other consultancy companies that did it, an external inquiry by a safe pair of hands, commonly a former employee, comes in and does it, and that's the cover-up. And, as Elaine says, several times, report after report after report after report. And some of the memorable lines are, it's only administrative failings. That's the conclusion of an inquiry into alleged planning irregularities in 8 county councils. And if you believe there were only administrative failings, you were born yesterday. Penalty points, Assistant Commissioner O'Mahony. There were only 8 cases of penalty points that merited further investigation. There were thousands of them. Found out by another report. These are legacy issues. And in any case, listen, there's no need to worry. We've already implemented the findings. So relax. The next thing is an intermission. This play, you can go and get married, raise a family, and have grandchildren before the next act occurs. And I picked them out. I had one that was 34 years, and then I thought of Louise O'Keeffe, who recently was vindicated by the European Court, having taken on the state and everything else. And just a quick one on this. When an individual is competing with the state has 3 big advantages. Anonymity. The Department of Education or the HSE, anonymity, deep pockets, and endless patience. And that's why it's an uneven battle when it comes. Until, however long the intermission is, eventually there's more explosive reports, as another bomb goes off in Elaine's terms. Next act, the truth at last. Finally, we get a sworn, judicial, international, everything is thrown at it. Independent judge, courageous, you've heard some of the names here, compellability of witnesses, they cut to the chase, they name unambiguous findings, and you have heroic journalists like Elaine, who give the best years of their life sitting down in Dublin Castle, listening to this stuff and alerting us all to it. Some memorable lines. Donegal was not a statistical blip, and I won't go through them all. You know what they are, okay? Now, what happens next? We have the truth at last. But then we have an Irish solution to an Irish problem. The findings cannot be used, even though the findings are 10 volumes of evidence, they can't be used against individuals in subsequent trials. Expert practice, they go and get best practice from the north of Ireland on the policing authority And what did they do? They put in a policing authority that has a hole in it. So the policing authority, Dennis Bradley was here the other night, he contrasted the two. What we have in the north is a real policing authority. What we have down here is a policing authority with one hand tied behind its back. And that's classic. They do it in every single case. Niamh Hardiman, a new CD, has written about it. Irish Governance and Crisis, you can read the book. She spoke here a few years ago. Redacted reports, these ugly documents that are blacked out, no names. State compensation for victims running to, at this stage it must be billions, and the guilty go free to a new life. They can get a job in Europe, they can be moved on, spirited away, and so on. And some of the memorable lines are, Mr. X has now been appointed to the European whatever, whatever, whatever. And by the way, when he comes back home, I won't go into that. The solution would require constitutional change. Sorry about that. And the other one is relax the recommendations. What's the next act? The next act is the empire strikes back. The old culture re-emerges, eats the reforms. The reformers are seen off the premises. The individual versus the state, I've talked about that, they lose out. And somebody asked, whatever happened to your man who was brought in to sort out? He's gone. He's gone back to England. And what you have is referred to here earlier, implementation deficit disorder, nothing happens. And we get a promise of a new way of doing politics. Now, that's repeated again and again and again, as you've heard. So I tried, like all the others do, and like Gerard has done, can we get to the bottom of this? Because unless we can get to the root cause of this, it's going to continue. We're stuck with it. And this is my shot at it, okay? Why does this happen? First of all, I'm repeating, if there are no personal consequences, and not only are there no negative consequences for blatant failure, for corruption, if there are not only are there no consequences, often the people are promoted and rewarded. Okay? So now, where are there no consequences? Perjury is not treated as a crime in this country. There is rampant perjury before the courts. Judges have remarked on it. We've seen some of the most eminent people in the state perjure themselves, and it's not concluded. And what was her name? The journalist from Sligo who was put in jail over the beef tribunal, Susan O'Keefe. She said, Ireland is a craven state if perjury is not a crime. Regulation is politicised. Every single regulatory body, the Cork Examiner, the Irish Examiner had an editorial last week, all our regulatory bodies are politicised. They have a hole in them, like the policing authority on board Planola, so that politicians can always intervene to fix something that is accommodating their political interests. Public servants, in the words of one of our speakers here, Gerard Howland, go along to get along with promises they know are not achievable. They may say, oh, it's challenging. It's challenging. No, it can't be done. Officials don't flag skeletons in the cupboard until, what was her name, Catherine Lawless, Tune Babies, blows the whistle. Stuff that's known. I'm reading a book at the moment called A Small Town Near Auschwitz. Nobody in the small town near Auschwitz knew what was going on, right? And we have that repeated here. Of course, they all knew, they're working there. I'm quoting Catherine Connolly here, who, in one of her remarks before the PAC a few weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, she said, whistleblower legislation is an illusion. Whistleblowers suffer terribly. They suffer terribly. There's a broken two-tier system of justice involving the Garda, the DPP, the Department of Justice, and Law Society. In Ireland, class matters. And finally, Pat Rabbitt, who was here the other day, has written about the system of accountability that operates between ministers and the civil service. And I'm quoting him, he said, the system of accountability we pretend to have is grounded in a lie. It enables ministers to hide behind the skirts of civil servants and for the civil servants to avoid accountability. Presentation he gave to another summer school. So, we tolerate this stuff. Now, I now come to, I'm just one or two slides to go and I'm finished, John, I'll be on time. So I'm trying again. You have all of this repeated tribunals, spinning wheels getting nowhere. And we're fated to continue with that. It's not going to stop until we deal with some of the things I've listed there, like perjury, some of the legislation, and so on. But I've turned then to say, is there something else happening that can explain this? And I thought of looking at what's happened in America. Could the root cause lie not among the actors in my play, but in the audience? Okay? Put down your popcorn for a minute now and take a deep breath. Elizabeth Drew, a contributor to the New York Review of Books, Trump's success has been made possible by a large portion of the electorate swallowing his simplistic statements about the problems facing the country and his impossible promises to solve them. Quite frankly, it is in the ignorance of the electorate that is most troubling. Britain. Could it be the audience? Brexit was made possible by the electorate swallowing the simplistic statements of Nigel Farage, who spooked the Conservative Party, who lost their nerve, called a referendum, and we know the consequences. And just more recently, the Grenfell Tower, a reaction from a person in the crowd interviewed on Channel 4, we have allowed this to happen by our complacency. We all need to wake up and engage. So here I'm zoning over into the kind of position that Gerard took earlier. What's our role in all of this? And so I turn to Ireland. Could it be the audience in Ireland? Could it be we who elect them knowing the game that's going on? So this is Dermot Ferreter writing. Public connivance in Q-tourism casts a long shadow, the influence of local culture and Irish political style. In the audience the other night, talking about the guards, Majella O'D, who's a regular attender here, said about the penalty points. She said, we're all giving out about the guards squashing these thousands of, but she said there were our penalty points. It suited us to have our penalty points squashed. We are colluding in this thing. This was a statement from one of the most outstanding papers delivered in MacGill that I attended from the late Peter Mair, who died prematurely after his presentation here out on a fishing trip. The problem is we don't respect the state. The state is not to be trusted but to be taken advantage of. That's the culture of Q-tourism and strokes. We have an electoral system governed by amoral localism. Susan Mitchell, talking about Portlaoise Hospital, set out in clear terms how the people around Portlaoise elect a TD, Charlie Flanagan, who can persuade them to maintain Portlaoise as masquerading as a type 2 hospital when it's only a type 3 hospital, when the clinical advice from the people who work there is it won't work and you're getting a poorer service. You are more likely to die because of the service there. And so the people are taken in by the political blandishments, by the rhetoric, by the Q-tourism of it all. And they are the sufferers. And there are many other, during the week here, it came up again and again and again. It came back to what is our part in this. And Gerard referred to it as a central theme of Gerard's. So finally, conclusion, more reports and inquiries are not the answer. And this is all kind of highfalutin stuff, but I can't get any nearer to it than this. We think of America, we think of Britain, and then we think of Ireland. Informed, engaged citizens, refusing to swallow the simplistic statements about the problems and the possible problems we had to solve. Last night, John Moran here, who gave a terrific presentation for those of you here, he said, we have to demand more from our politicians. We have to demand more, insist on more. And I would say one of the things we have to insist on is consequences. Brendan Howland has repeatedly said there should never be anybody sacked for poor performance. Now, we're not talking about poor performance here. They're not even sacked for corruption. If you do not have that sanction, and I'm not a person that goes around looking for heads, I don't do it. But if the case demands it, you have to. Otherwise, people will say, you have a culture of impunity. And to take a phrase from Gerard's, if I can put it into my slide here, personal responsibility. It comes down to lack of not being complacent, taking more personal responsibility, demanding more of our politicians, and put simply, a rejection of populism, be it from the left, right, or centre. Thanks very much.